Hello, friendos. My name is Nez. The year is officially done, but we're continuing our look back and year-end review of Arknights in 2023. We're gonna reminisce about the past, we're gonna reminisce about all these events, while also hoping for the future. So we're gonna be reacting to all of the events that happened this year. We had What the Firelight Cast, a side story event that had direct connections with the main story, the main Victorian arc of Arknights. You could consider this an actual sequel to episode 9, with everything that happened with Dublin and Bagpipe and Silac and Reed. During this event, not gonna lie, I forgot to read it. I only got to read it months later, after remembering that I forgot to read it when episode 12 came out. This was also one of the better written events of the year, mirroring the journey between Reed and her sister Iblana. At least Reed is repenting for all her war crimes. She left Rhodes Island in order to start her own Dublin, in order to fight back against her sister. We had some more characterization with Bagpipe, who I've once said was a low tier in terms of story, finally got the characterization that she deserved. She was out of the partner zone with Horn and Chen, and she finally got her starring spot. She got to butt heads with Reed actually, and Reed the Flame Shadow, who was the premiere of our first 6-star Pharmacist. I 100% regret not getting her now, but there were a shit ton of S-tier banners this year that there was no way I'd risk pulling Reed Alter when one of the biggest limited banners was to come very soon right after. So we got our first skin for GG, released back then. Nami definitely cooked on that one. And so far, this event was low-key very good. The event mechanics was pretty great. Okay, I strike that. Invisibility is always an annoying mechanic, especially with the Reeds, especially with the fire, but there was a lot of micromanaging with this event, with the fire and both the invisible Dublin enemies. At least the story was good. At least the story was good. So, after What the Firelight Cast, we finally had our next limited event. We have Where Vernal Winds Will Never Blow, the continuation of the Sui siblings saga. By far, my current favorite ongoing arc in Arknights, because you could just tell they are building up to something big and climactic with one new Sui sibling every single year. Last year we had the Blue Woman, this year, Chongyue. Y'all already know how I feel about Chongyue. I don't really like him as a character, just because he's based off Jackie Chan, and Jackie Chan's kind of an asshole in real life. Male Knights Enjoyers were eating good this year. They got Milnar, they got... Do people like Minimalist? I don't know about that. They got Vigil. Okay, maybe not Vigil. They got Chongyue. They got Stainless. There were so many great Male Knights this year, and we're still ending it off with Executor. Male Knights Enjoyers are eating great. They're eating great. The story in itself was also peak. It was very Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Shaolin Soccer, and it reminded me a lot about those old movies. We had the continuation with the Sui siblings dealing with a bunch of Farenmits, not just their evil older brother who was puppeteering things in the background, but also with another Farenmit that showed up. Overall, this was a great event. Lynn has turned into a competent operator nowadays, especially with her module. She's been very useful in the most recent Pinch Out event. There were so many niche operators this year that were released in between mega meta operators. Like, it was hilarious. There were so many victim banners that just cannot survive the pulls, and people were saving for the much more important quote-unquote meta banners of the year. But it didn't really matter because, surprise, surprise, the Chongyue event was actually one of the most financially successful banners and months that Arknights has ever had. They broke the peak of revenue since the launch of Arknights, and that doesn't happen. It's very rare. Chongyue's event beating that while not having a quote-unquote meta operator was actually quite wild. It was wild. But it turned out to be the second most successful event for Arknights this year. The most successful one, we'll get to that much later. After Chongyue's event, we had the rerun to the Blue Woman event, Invitation to Wine. Ah, the Blue Woman event. The Blue Woman event. Who would have thought that a year ago, after saying that the Blue Woman was overpowered just because she could solo the majority of the story modes in all of Arknights, we wouldn't be worrying about the Blue Woman anytime soon, because we got some bigger power creep problems to deal with. This was also the release of Lee back then, but more importantly, the Blue Woman came out. Her and her dragons. She still didn't have her module back then. She could only summon 2 Mega Dragons, but she could still solo most of the game modes in Arknights. This was probably one of of the best times to start Arknights because if you started out with Ling in your account, you basically won the game. You could solo the game as easy as possible. But yeah, Ling is the least of our problems nowadays, especially with DPS operators changing the way the game plays. With Ling, we could sacrifice 6 deployment slots just to summon 3 dragons, but she's pretty balanced compared to what we have nowadays. So Chinese New Year event of last year, definitely one for the books. I remember it very vividly because I think it had one of the best boss fights in the entire game where you fought against a mirror of the Sui. It was definitely one of the most memorable boss fights in the entire game. The mechanics were not as obtuse as the original Dusk event because we only had extra lives on enemy mobs. At least those are easier to deal with. These Chinese events always have very obtuse mechanics, but at least they're not as bad as the black and white mechanics of Dusk. After the Ling rerun, we had a continuation of Chongyue's event, a splinter off of the Sui sibling saga. We got a death in Chunfen and the premiere of Chobai as a playable character. By this time, we were already making content for Arknights. We started during the Chongyue event, and we just kept the ball rolling, and look where we are now. We're still making Arknights content all the way to the end of the year, and we're part of the Arknights content creator program. We've signed up for the Enfield content creator program. I remember for this event, I made a story review of everything that went on. I don't know why I stopped doing story reviews. Maybe because they took a lot of time. But this event was pretty good. I remember this like the back of my hand. We got Saga content. Saga enjoyers got a lot of meat from this event because we got Saga just butting heads with the village chief and shit. It was a mystery. It was a murder mystery involving Chobai and her little Shota, which she adopted at the end of the event. Unfortunately for Chobai, she was also a victim of the meta banners that were coming all throughout the year. A lot of people skipped Chobai, not quite sure where she stands now among power scaling, but as we go on reminiscing about all these banners that I missed, I am starting to regret that I didn't pull for most of them just because I had to save for many of the meta operators that were coming out this year. But of course, I then remember that I probably had an easier time because I had Milnar, Texas, and eventually the next limited executor to come. So I think I had an easier time just using up my currency for the meta operators this year. I still have to catch up on getting these characters through gold certs instead.